We want to have borders, we want to have security. We want to have things to be good and safe. We want a great education. We want a strong and powerful military. And ideally, we don't want to have to use it. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again. This is what has got everybody worried, is that Trump is likely to ask hard questions over sustaining major US policies, or American policies, including defending Taiwan, and some experts think that he could even swap Taiwan for a big deal with China. What many experts deeply fear is the possible decline in US power should Trump carry his insular and isolationist agenda. Trump has vowed to impose an across-the-board hike of 60% in tariffs on Chinese exports. Now, this could result in the decoupling of the two of the world's largest economies. India will not have any time to rejoice. Trump may claim to be a true friend of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He is likely to impose a 10% rise in tariffs on Indian exports to the US when he takes office. In fact, India had a taste of that during the first term of Trump. In 2019, Trump, as president, withdrew the preferential tariffs that New Delhi or India had enjoyed under America's what is called the Generalized System of Preferences, or GSP. Nothing but the truth. Hello, I'm Raj Chengap of India Today and your host for Nothing But the Truth. Every week, we will deal with key issues of concern and bring you perspectives and clarity as to why these matter to you without holding back on the truth. In one of the greatest political comebacks, Donald Trump will be sworn in as the 47th US president on January 20th, 2025. Because of the radical reforms Trump propounds, both for America's domestic and foreign policies, his second term as president is likely to bring about among the most tumultuous changes and upheavals that we will see across the world. Now, this new world disorder that it will create would impact India too. So in this episode of Nothing But the Truth, we will look at what I call the world according to Trump and how India should deal with him. First, let's look at what is the world according to Trump. Now, there's an old saying that genius is the ability to make the complex to the simple. Trump's appeal is that he has an uncomplicated and straightforward worldview. As you notice, he speaks quite plainly and bluntly about whatever he wants to say, and is an effective communicator. Now, in his victory speech in Florida recently, he told his cheering supporters, and I'm quoting him, "The core is common sense. We want to have borders, we want to have security. We want to have things to be good and safe. We want a great education. We want a strong and powerful military. And ideally, we don't want to have to use it. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. We will make America safe, strong, prosperous, powerful, and free again." Very, very simply put, as only Trump can. And at the end of his speech, he declared, "We make promises and we keep promises." Now, this is the kind of plain speaking that Trump did during the campaign, which seems to have struck a chord with the US electorate. They have voted him back with a handsome majority, ignoring all the many felonies, including sexual abuse, various federal courts that have charged Trump with. In his second term, as in his first, Trump's domestic agenda will be the most compelling concern for him. His foreign policy will be subservient to the radical reforms he has in mind for his country. Now, let me give you an idea of some of the radical reforms he has, because during his campaign for his re-election, Trump's team brought out a manifesto called Agenda 47. Now, this listed a range of major policy initiatives, both domestic and foreign policy, that he would implement once he gets to office. One of them includes a really radical downsizing of government bureaucracy and restructuring of administrative appointments, and he plans to fire those he calls rogue bureaucrats and make way for those who he says would be aligned to the Republican policy. Apart from this, among the first things Trump promises to do when he takes charge in January 2025, is to execute what he calls the largest deportment program of illegal immigrants ever undertaken by the US. Now, I will touch on that later, but in his foreign policy agenda, Trump will try to ram through his disruptive agenda as well. And therefore, that comes to the big question, what is the world according to Trump? Simply put, it is ensuring America's interests first, with those of every other nation, including that of India, coming a very distant second. Now, Trump is unabashed about his nakedly transactional approach to key issues, and that is because he is convinced that America's decline was because it ended up paying for everyone else's bills to maintain the global order, while the US itself got diminishing returns for it. Now, as Trump puts it, these guys ate our lunch. More than anything else, Trump is hell-bent on dismantling America's international statecraft that spans 8 decades, that's over 80 years. Now, after World War II, America fashioned alliances and institutions that would foster a liberal order to enable peace and prosperity for much of the world while ensuring US supremacy and its idealism. Post-war US presidents pursued a very expansive foreign and trade policy that pushed for greater globalization through openness to trade and investments, and the US even intervened militarily against forces that threatened world peace. Trump wants to do just the opposite of this. And he has a 3D policy of disrupt, disengage, and deglobalize. Now, in his first term too, he carried out some of this particular agenda. If you recall, he got locked into a trade war with China and also pulled out of major international pacts, including the 2014 Paris climate change agreements. In fact, I'd gone to Paris to report that, and it was disappointing to see a major country like the US pull out under the orders of President Trump. He then antagonized NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the US allies, by saying that the security blanket that America provided them was no longer going to be free. Trump wanted them to increase their own defense spending to meet the costs. Now, in Trump's second term, he is expected to be even more volatile and transactional in his style of functioning. And that's the big worry. His second term comes at a time of two major international challenges, the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Gaza conflict. Now, regarding the Ukraine war, Trump boasted he would get Russian President Vladimir Putin to strike a deal and end the war on his first day in office. He said somewhat the same of the Gaza conflict, though with lesser conviction. And Trump's stance with his NATO allies is likely to remain the same. He will continue to ask them to cough up more for their security. And this is what has got everybody worried, is that Trump is likely to ask hard questions over sustaining major US policies, or American policies, including defending Taiwan. And some experts think that he could even swap Taiwan for a big deal with China. What many experts deeply fear is the possible decline in US power should Trump carry his insular and isolationist agenda into his second term. This could, in the long term, lead to greater world conflict. Condoleezza Rice, a key policymaker in the George W. Bush presidency, without directly referring to Trump, warned of this global retreat that Trump is planning. In a perceptive article in Foreign Affairs before the election results, she wrote that the new four horsemen of the apocalypse, as she calls it, populism, nativism, isolationism, and protectionism, are riding together again, and they are challenging the political center. The danger, she says, of an American retreat in global affairs is that the disorder it would create could bring more strife and turmoil across the world, with debilitating consequences even for the US. And she recalls that before the First World War and before the Second World War, America had practiced an isolationist policy and was dragged into the war. And she believes that the route for American security and prosperity lies with engaging the world and not with disengaging the world. But Trump, though, is not one to heed such wise counsel. Ever since his first term, he has been convinced that other countries have gleefully exploited America's generosity for too long and that it was payback time now. Really top among the list of policy changes Trump is contemplating is a drastic rise in tariffs. And typically of Donald Trump, he describes the word tariff as the most beautiful word in his dictionary. In doing so, Trump is, once he imposes these tariffs that he plans to do, is likely to destroy the global trading system, particularly the effectiveness of the World Trade Organization. But Trump really doesn't care because he believes it does not anymore serve America's interest. Trump intends to erect protectionist walls around America, which would well mark the beginning of the end of globalization. It is already being called globalization because of COVID. Now this could herald the end of globalization as we knew it for the past few decades. Now, Trump's prime target is China, but it is also India, whom he calls the tariff king. China has had a favorable trade balance with the US for long, which rankled Trump even during his first term. Even though he pushed China hard to set the imbalance right, it remains skewed heavily in China's favor. And just to give you an example, of the $575 billion worth of goods traded with the US in 2023, China enjoyed a favorable balance of close to $279 billion. That's an enormous amount, and Trump has vowed to impose an across-the-board hike of 60% in tariffs on Chinese exports. Now, this could result in the decoupling of the two of the world's largest economies. India will not have any time to rejoice over what is happening to China once Trump comes in, because India too has a favorable trade surplus with the US of close to $35 billion, nowhere close to what China has with the US, but Trump is clearly upset about it and will also target India. And while Trump may claim to be a true friend of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he is likely to impose a 10% rise in tariffs on Indian exports to the US when he takes office. In fact, India had a taste of that during the first term of Trump. In 2019, Trump, as president, withdrew the preferential tariffs that New Delhi or India had enjoyed under America's what is called the Generalized System of Preferences, or GSP, that covered close to $6.3 billion or 12% of the goods exported to the US. What he did was that he withdrew that particular concession that was there, and that impacted close to 12% of our exports. Now, he also raised the tariffs on Indian steel and aluminium, and that went up by 25% and 10% respectively. All India could do at that time was to retaliate by imposing higher tariffs on 29 goods it imported from the US, including almonds, walnuts, chickpeas, and apples. Now, that's something that friends are not supposed to be doing, but they literally traded punches during those particular years. Now, many experts expect Trump to be only tougher in his second tenure to India, and that is not good news. Another likely area of friction is Trump's policy on migrants, especially illegal ones. And mind you, it is not only the South Americans who will feel the heat of Trump's crackdown on illegal immigrants, but there are said to be an estimated 725,000 illegal immigrants from India. 725,000, that is 7.25 lakh immigrants. Illegal immigrants are there in the US, particularly from the states of Punjab and Gujarat, and they have sought refuge in the US for the past decade or so. Last year, the Biden administration, Joe Biden administration, deported over 1,100 Indians back to India, and this is a trend that Trump is likely to push even more, because he said he's now going to launch one of the largest ever deportment programs for illegal immigrants once he takes office. Worse, Trump is also likely to further trim the number of H-1B visas for non-immigrant workers. That's something that most Indians go for, particularly in the software industry. And currently that limit is 85,000 annually, and a bulk of this H-1B visas are cornered by Indians, that might be trimmed down, and the second Trump administration is likely to withdraw the spouse's work permits and make rules for issuing such visas far more stringent and possibly even cut down on visas for them. So that's another area of concern for us. Now, there is a downside for Trump when he takes these steps, because along with this, the restrictive trade policy measures that he is going to launch, mass deportations are also likely to cause price rise and inflation in the US, and since it will become much more costlier to produce goods, and that is something that Trump campaigned and said that he would lower the prices, but he might very quickly run into issues if he goes ahead with some of the programs that he's doing right now. But now let's turn finally into as to how India should deal with Donald Trump in his second term. Trump's return does not evoke as much anxiety in New Delhi as it does in the other world capitals. That is because in the past 2 decades, India and the US have overcome what Prime Minister says, overcome the hesitation, Prime Minister Modi calls it, overcome the hesitations of history. And this has seen 2 countries forge a strategic partnership that has grown both in stature, depth, and breadth. In his first term, Trump's trade antagonism towards China saw him view India as an Asian bulwark against Xi Jinping's aggressive ambitions. The Trump administration worked hard to put in place agreements that would make transfer of defense technology and equipment to India on par with its closest allies. So it needed this antagonism with China for Trump to swing India's way, and in his first term, we benefited by that. But it was really President Joe Biden who took India-US relations to an altogether higher level by not only clearing deals when he was president to sell state-of-the-art drones, but also in a first permitting jet engine production in India. Now, that was a big step in terms of defense relations with the US. And Biden and Modi also signed up for a major collaboration on critical and emerging technologies, including semiconductor chips, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and wireless telecommunication. Now, these were big deals which were struck when Joe Biden, of course, he continues to be president, but this was a very important development in Indo-US relations. Now, therefore, as I said earlier, there is a comfort level between India and US, there is bipartisan support, and therefore the unease that the rest of the world might feel when President Trump takes over is not so much in India, but experts say that there is no room for complacency given the fact that Trump has a very volatile and mercurial personality, and experts say that India has to work hard to stay on his right side. Now, when I spoke to an expert who deals with India-US relations, he said, and I'm quoting him, it has to be a win-win situation. For that, both sides must realize the inevitability of India-US cooperation. What that means is for India aspiring to be a developed nation by 2047, the Viksit Bharat dream, there is in fact no better partner than the US. And for Trump's mercantile mind, India with its large middle-class market and talent pool makes it important for him to continue to engage with India more closely for America's economic growth and for creating jobs. That's the win-win. Both India and US must feel that that partnership and that strategic friendship that we have benefits both of them, and therefore the possibilities of engaging even closer will happen despite the fact that Trump has such a transactional approach towards international relations. The key is for Trump to see India as a solution provider for all the major problems that America faces. Now, just to give you one example, few people know that India contributes as much as 40% to the prescription drugs consumed in the US. 40%. This has helped America save over $250 billion annually in health expenditure because of India's competitive pricing of its drugs. We all know how low priced our drugs is, and that has benefited America. And so, therefore, there must be many more such examples that make America, and Trump particularly, feel that engagement with America is highly beneficial to it. Now, India must also try to be the first movers in the opportunities the Trump administration could throw up. Remember, he's going to target China in a big way. So the de-risking from China is critical for US companies, which offers Indian companies a chance to partner with them in a host of key areas. Now, here the Modi government needs to ensure that these companies have a level playing field, that there's transparency and consistency in policy, apart from making sure that there is an absolute ease of doing business. India may have one more thing going for it, for Trump to maintain good relationships with us, and this is the high-profile and prosperous 4.5 million Indian diaspora, whom Trump has actively sought to woo. Kamala Harris may exit as vice president in January, but Usha Vance, wife of VP-elect J.D. Vance, will ensure that the Indian flavor remains there. Finally, with Trump being an instinctive leader and responsive to personalized diplomacy, the old Modi playbook of hugs, rallies, catchy slogans like Namaste Trump and blandishments could work very well. We also know that Trump will be predictably unpredictable, and that is precisely why Trump's second term promises to be one of the biggest turning points in world history. To know more on the subject, do read my extensive cover story on Trump's second coming in the latest India Today magazine. Thank you for being with me in this episode of Nothing But the Truth. I look forward to having you with me next week. Nothing but the truth.